Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, talking about awakenings in the story of One Piece opens up an entire can of worms. What is awakening? What isn't? Basically, you decide. A whole lot of people clown theory channels and theories is like we're just thinking too much about the story, making mountains out of molehills, yada yada rabble rabble. But you know, like legitimately, some of this is Oda's fault. As one example among many, we straight up do not know whether Yamato was awakened. But you can absolutely forgive any One Piece fan who believes this to be the case. That seemed like the point of recent reveals with Lucci and with Kaku. Both showed up in Egghead with awakened fruits. We got to see the difference between them pre-time skip and post-time skip. They now possess God Scarves, Hagoromo. But wait, the gears start turning. We see Luffy awaken. Luffy also possesses this same God Scarf. So maybe the God Scarf tells you when a fruit is awakened. Very frankly, I think that this is the intuitive thought. So then you go back to Wano. You see Yamato's Devil Fruit abilities. You see the same God Scarf. Therefore, Yamato is awakened. But then you spend some time to think about it. And you remember, wait a second, Gear 4th Luffy, unawakened Luffy, also possessed this same God Scarf. Look at every time he uses Snake Man. And then you overthink Yamato. Does it even make sense for Yamato to be awakened? Wasn't the whole point that Kaido had Yamato shackled? Presumably with sea stone cuffs from the moment that they possessed a Devil Fruit. Or a different example, we know for a fact that the jailers of Impel Down are awakened zones. They don't have God Scarves. But somebody who did in the pre-time skip, who was most likely not awakened, was Enel. But maybe we need some more theories in this video to increase our headcanon level. It is incredibly likely that Chopper's monster point is some sort of awakening. It greatly resembles the awakened zone fruit users from Impel Down. It's also very distinct and different from the normal forms granted by unawakened zones. And it's stated that awakened zones are difficult to control. Vegapunk says it's usually the case that awakened zone powers absorb and control the user's personality, which perfectly describes Monster Point when Chopper first revealed it. But so here's the kicker. Monster Point Chopper does not possess the God Scarf. So alright, let's apply some more rules. Let's ignore everything from the pre-time skip. A lot of people think that Oda has meticulously planned out every little detail of the story from the beginning. And I think the compilation of evidence suggests that this is not true. This is not slander, we're just slightly humanizing the man, okay? I think that it's fair to speculate that when Oda first conceived of the idea of awakening, but hadn't really hardcore gotten into it, it didn't become apparent to him that you needed some visual way to distinguish whether somebody is awakened or not to help the readers, particularly when they are not being controlled by the spirit of the devil. Because while there's some shared physical characteristics between Monster Point and the jailers, I presume that once you are awakened, you can alter your forms as well. So Monster Point's design is not enough. Plus, general size is one of the most confusing and inconsistent elements of the story. You guys remember when Katakuri fell? Suddenly he's the size of a giant. So we reach Egghead, right, and Oda's like, okay, I got an awakened Lucci. But we just came off of Wano and Oda realizes, look, the God Scarf is just way too cool. We have to use that. And suddenly that becomes the thing. Maybe. But it still doesn't change the fact that Oda's already established a precedent with Snake Man that you can have this and not be awakened. So even if it were to be true, the community has no real way of being able to discern this for a fact. Are you guys getting tired of this conversation yet? We haven't even gotten into the idea of maybe partial awakenings. Chopper's was artificial, Luffy maybe was close with Gear 4th. I'll spare you. At this point in the story, it is my opinion that you can believe whatever the hell that you want to. Unless Oda has specifically said that a character is awakened, then it could go either way. But obviously we're talking about this for a reason. Awakening is a big part of the story right now. And I think that it's a big part of Luffy versus Kaido. So today I want to deep dive into that battle and really try to understand it. All the while maybe establishing just how broken Luffy's Devil Fruit actually is. So just take a moment to like the video, subscribe. A lot of you are watching and not doing these things. For me, please, and let's begin. According to Kaido himself, a Devil Fruit awakening occurs when a user's mind and body catches up to their powers. So it's not so simple as you've had the fruit for a long time or you've used the fruit a lot, and then suddenly you have to be awakened. I find this to be a very interesting creative choice on Oda's part. First off, it makes it complex. Complex in a way that I actually enjoy. It makes you think that there's something deeper to understanding what makes a user capable of awakening. As somebody who enjoys mystery and depth, this appeals to me. As just one example among many, it's possible that essentially death is required. Certainly, we've only seen one devil fruit that's actively awakened within the present events of the story, and that's Luffy's, and Luffy did so after dying. We know this for a fact because Momonosuke was watching the battle unfold, and Luffy's voice disappeared. His heartbeat vanished. Maybe this foreshadows some rule. And this rule could definitely interrelate with Kaido as this being that can't be killed. Although if I'm honest, I don't actually believe this because I think that restarting your heart is very particular to Luffy's devil fruit, the drums of liberation. But the negative flip side of this complexity is you can never really know if somebody is awakened, and you can never really know whether they should be or not, whether it makes sense. Confusion in a story should only ever be intentional, and ultimately that confusion should eventually be rewarded. And I felt like this was part of the problem with Luffy versus Kaido. Awakening as a concept was something that was heavily highlighted at the conclusion of Wano. We see Laws awakening kids, Luffy awakened in the arc, and personally, I expected Kaido to have an awakening as well. And honestly, this seemed like the obvious thematic choice to make here. This became the arc of awakenings, when this concept will be highlighted. Basically, for everybody to awaken but your main antagonist felt like a weird decision, especially since the prior two main antagonists that Luffy actually fought in Katakuri and Doflamingo were both awakened. For me and many others, this would have been a visual road sign that the battle was nearing its completion because Kaido was now giving it his all. So in a way, the idea of awakenings as Oda has established it worked against the conclusion of that arc. And to me it's somewhat frustrating because it was a very easy problem to solve. You just needed to clarify. If Kaido was awakened or used an awakening, just like the text box with Lucci, you just give one to Kaido. Or if this is not the case, once Luffy awakens his devil fruit, Kaido reveals that he is not awakened. You don't even have to explain why, assuming that you are saving this knowledge for some future moment. You just need to say it. And at the very least, you've created intrigue and mystery. Why is Kaido not awakened? The secret becomes something to look forward to. But instead we're left in this awkward state of uncertainty. In my opinion, to this day, this is Oda's biggest mistake at the conclusion of a major battle. Because Luffy delivers his final punch, but too many manga readers at the time had no idea that this was the actual end of the fight. And in my opinion, all this compounds with the fact that there was many battles with Luffy and Kaido that felt like it could be the end, so it's a little bit like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, leaving us uncertain as to where the end actually was. Although I thought that the anime handled this much better and was just much more clear than the manga. This being said, there are some unusual aspects of Kaido's forms, and it is possible Kaido was actually awakened. This is an argument that you will hear from some people, but Kaido revealed his hybrid form. And then in particular moments in the middle of the fight, the hybrid form's appearance changed. His eyebrows became devil fruit wisps, his nose got wider, and his teeth got sharper. And based on context, this form was stronger, saved until near the conclusion of the fight, and it was never explained why. However, it is my opinion that Kaido was not awakened, because I just cannot fathom Kaido demonstrating an awakening and Oda not pointing it out to us. Not saying that this is impossible, but it just seems unlikely to me. I enjoy the interpretation that Kaido's mind was not yet ready for his awakening. Perhaps establishing some sort of disconnect between Kaido's own desires and the desires of the devil within him. Kaido made it very clear. He wants to lose. He wants for there to be somebody strong enough to kill him. And he decided long ago that the only person who could do this would be Joy Boy. So maybe this desire for death prevented him from awakening. Or maybe he simply did not reflect the fruit. We have to keep in mind that somebody still possesses the Dragon Devil Fruit, and that's Momonosuke. I do not believe that it would be some great surprise if Momonosuke awakened it, even though it is artificial. This is in fact an official question posed by the manga. Vegapunk says, well, we're not really sure whether they can awaken or not, meaning the door is left open. And assuming this to be true, Momonosuke and Kaido couldn't be any more different. The Gorosei told us point blank that it had been many hundreds of years since the last time that Luffy's fruit, the Nika Nika, had awakened. This puts him up on a pedestal. It creates the thought that Luffy is uniquely suited for the fruit. Or think about Blackbeard, how he specifically chose the Yami Yami no Mi before beginning his adventure. Besides this fruit's power, maybe there is another reason why Blackbeard had to have this fruit and only this one. Because it was a fruit that he could represent. and eventually awaken. So if Momonosuke were to ever awaken his devil fruit, he would also, in my opinion, be uniquely suited. And Kaido not awakening it would make more sense. Personally, I like the headcanon that there are certain devil fruits that are more difficult to embody than others. So in the case of like Lucci and Kaku, they have regular zone fruits. Maybe these are simply easier to awaken. But with mythical zones, maybe Logias and some Paramecias, this is not the case. But there's still some aspects of Kaido's powers that are not explained. And I think the anime made this even more interesting. So let's speculate a new power. Overall right now the anime is being praised to ridiculous degrees. Honestly, they've done such a good job with it. But there are still some things that get under people's skin, and a lot of these have to do with like the weird sound effects for powers. It's a lot like Dragon Ball, but also some of the actual powers that they used in the anime that just aren't present in the manga at all. Strange auras, you guys know. But one of these that caught my attention was for Luffy. There was a power-up that he had while fighting Kaido where you can see sakura blossoms just basically appearing out of nowhere. This occurred just before Luffy unlocked Rio, but it was presented in the anime in such a way that it was like Luffy's epiphany about Ryu was related to the will of Wano, as if the people of Wano were providing Luffy some kind of strength. Now, this is anime, of course guys. When you watch enough anime, sometimes shit happens that you're not supposed to think too much about. But this time it might be different because of Luffy's powers. Luffy's devil fruit is literally the mythical dream god. He makes dreams into reality, literally. And I think that Oda effectively communicated this with a similar concept at the end of the arc. Luffy has just gone Gear 5th, and it's truly the final moment of the battle. And what happens? Well, the lanterns that were sent up from the Flower Capital are now surrounding him. Each of these lanterns containing some kind of wish, which Luffy will shortly fulfill. Luffy's defeat of Kaido was a will that was passed down. Now, I think that a lot of people would argue that this is not a tangible power-up, or even if it is, it's just purely motivation for Luffy. This motivation made him a little bit stronger. But I don't care if this is tinfoil or not, guys. I do seriously believe that it is possible, especially given the nature of Luffy's devil fruit, that he is actively powered up by the desires of those around him. It isn't purely thematic. It isn't purely motivation. Luffy possesses a power similar to the Spirit Bomb from Dragon Ball. He is absorbing the spirit or life force from those that have a dream he is actively trying to fulfill. But recently we made a video talking about the afterlife in One Piece and the various ways it's possible that the afterlife interacts with the world of the living. I'll go ahead and include it as a link in the description. But the general idea is that the mythology of the Fire Festival is actually real in the story of One Piece. Essentially, great joy or a great party blurs the borders between heaven and earth, so that those in the land of the living may communicate with the dead. So once again, you can hypothetically apply this to Luffy. It isn't just the wills or the desires of people around Luffy. In the case of Wano specifically, in large part due to the joy created from the Fire Festival, he was also tangibly being strengthened by the wills of the deceased, or the wills of the dead. Maybe you could shorten it to Will of D. But there's so many aspects of Luffy's devil fruit that is just not spelled out to us, and from this, it creates possibility. Luffy is a dream god, but what exactly determines which dreams he fulfills or not? Because there are some dreams that obviously go against what Luffy stands for. No matter how you want to spin it, there will always be some dreams left unfulfilled. Luffy cannot be the champion of everyone. So I think that we should also mention Hal. In the same video we've already mentioned, we speculate that death and destruction blur the borders between the land of the living and Hal, and Onigashima being characterized as Hal throughout that arc. Onigashima was Hal, and the Flower Capital was Heaven. And by the conclusion, the battlefield was all three. A totally hypothetical question I want to pose to you is, if Luffy can be strengthened by desires, could his powers work on other people as well, if somebody else is fighting to fulfill dreams? There's a really interesting comparison to be made at the conclusion of Wano between Oden, Orochi, and Kaido. At the end of his flashback, Oden is sentenced to boil in oil, and I think that the burning oil is meant to represent Hal. Similar to Luffy, Oden is enduring Hal, and I find it noteworthy that no matter what pain Oden endured, the oil isn't what killed him. Ultimately, it was a bullet to the head. This is clearly paralleled with Orochi, who literally catches fire. But the circumstances of this event are intriguing. First you have Kandro, the creature that he summoned, Kazenbo. It's like a demon from hell. Kandro states that it represents the will of the Kurozumi, their burning hatred. I would call this their evil desire or wish. Oda also touched on some of the keystone concepts of this speculation train involving music. Like the sound of the golden bell in Shandor, there's a connection between music and the afterlife. In the final moments of the battle, we see Hiyori playing her instrument, a song which should have spread joy, but its meaning had become mutilated. For her, it had become a song of revenge, of pain and suffering. As she played it, she had to wear a mask because she cried. And the specific song she's playing is titled Moon Princess. Moon, which we speculated in other videos, represents sort of unfulfilled desires. Her unfulfilled desire in this case was to get revenge against Orochi and see his kingdom crumble. So all of this was very symbolic. Hiyori herself seemed to be at a kind of crossroads. She even says this out loud, "How can I possibly smile?" It seemed as though she was close to being consumed by hatred. Remember, Onigashima became hell. And it was almost as if some sort of will from hell was trying to take her. And Orochi suggests this possibility not once, but twice. This is the precise reason why Oden held all of his friends above him and did not allow them to touch the burning oil. Not everyone can resist the allure of hell. Not everyone can smile when faced with hell. Luffy, the Straw Hats, and Oden are built different. They can take it, but not everyone can. As Oden died and Wano became a living hell, Ashura Doji and Dendro, those two who did not travel to the future with the others, they both fell. Consumed by pain or anger, their souls were mutilated. And then Dendro is the one to cut off Orochi's head. And then he embraces Hiyori. It reminds me of Fishman Island in Queen Otohime. Spare the children. This is about cyclical hatred. And Oda laid out the temptation of hell for Hiyori. But again, it's no coincidence that simultaneous as these events with Hiyori and Orochi is literally on fire, and this represents hell. You have Kaido, who uses Flame Dragon Torch. But while Orochi catching fire actually makes some sense because of Kazenbo, Kaido catching fire really came out of left field. This power was neither anticipated nor explained. I think that it's easy to assume that this is a power of his devil fruit. But like it or not, that is equally just a theory. It actually comes across more like an aura, perhaps something spiritual like Zoro and Ashura. But the point of all of these words is to eventually reach the theory that, like Luffy is powered by those dreams and desires which he is about to fulfill, Kaido could be the same but reversed. He carries the will of demons. During this fight, he is their champion, and they provide him with additional strength. Doflamingo says that awakenings affect the environment around the user. While this may not always be the case, it's certainly the case with Gear 5th Luffy. So if Luffy's Devil Fruit has some sort of passive power to fulfill dreams, it's possible that he could strengthen his enemies, assuming that they too are fighting for the wills of others. Guys, you should consider the will of the people and how this plays a role in the powers of Nika. Guys, I think that Luffy's abilities are incredibly broken. It's possible that the desires or wills or dreams of the people around him or in various realms of the afterlife have an effect. The setup preceding Luffy awakening his fruit and his heart restarting was the entire island of Wano, all of his allies, all simultaneously believing that Luffy cannot be defeated. It's possible that they believed it and Nika made it true. Nika made that dream reality. I find it hilarious how people think that Kaido would defeat Luffy in a rematch with Gear 5th. It's like they missed the whole idea of the fight in Wano. Luffy was defeated countless times and just could not die. So long as he possesses the physical means to do damage to somebody, the potential of this is limitless. I think that you can reasonably argue right now that it is impossible for Luffy to lose, so long as Luffy embodies the will of the people. Similarly reflected with Basil Hawkins using his abilities to determine that no matter what, Luffy's chance of survival is always greater than 0%. Meaning he gets what he needs when he needs it, always, so that he has a chance. And when Luffy has a chance, he always wins. To me, this is kind of the secret trump card of Luffy's Devil Fruit. He says it himself, he feels like he can do anything. And I think that this is essentially true. You gotta remember that Luffy is not rubber, even though we may still call the fruit the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And even though the Gorosei may refer to Luffy as possessing rubber-like attributes. Instead, I like to believe that Luffy is composed of freedom, given a physical form. And I believe it is in part limited by Luffy's own conceptions of his powers, and his belief in himself. Like we see with Gear 5th, Luffy has an idea and suddenly can just make it happen. Oh look, it's lightning above. Oh, why don't I just grab it and throw it? And then he does it. Doesn't matter if it makes sense. Luffy believed it was possible. Therefore it was. I think that the same concept applies to Snake Man. Luffy needed another power, and so just applied a new attribute to his rubber body. Suddenly his rubber is not acting like rubber. Luffy wanted to believe that he could do it, and then he could. You can even go back to the pre-time skip as Kuma pushes all of Luffy's pain out of his body. Pain that didn't seem to affect him. Luffy's journey mirrors Zoro, and throughout the pre-time skip, Zoro accumulates injuries that are oftentimes debilitating. Luffy in these same situations bounces back, and it's not because he's made of rubber. He's made of whatever he wants to believe himself to be made of, or perhaps what others believe him to be made of. Intangible concepts such as pain is something that Luffy's devil fruit, even while not awakened, can suppress if Luffy or others desire it. And for me, this potentially sheds light on how Joy Boy may have lost during the Void Century. Belief, will, and desire is integral to the fruit, but there's potentially competition, similar to this symbolic display in Wano of Luffy representing heaven and Kaido representing hell. Desires exist in both directions. I really think that it is as simple as Luffy's support was greater. It matters that Luffy has the will to win, and it matters that he has friends or allies that simultaneously believe in him and wish for the same. But if the world ever turned against Luffy, if Luffy no longer embodied their collective will, in my opinion, you would see an incredible nerf. If ever the circumstances of a battle reflected this, Luffy's heart would not restart. I conveyed my thoughts on this in the video. This feels like a major One Piece spoiler. Is it just me? I'll go ahead and leave it as a link in the description. But this is precisely what I speculate in that video. That Joy Boy, just the same as Odin before his death, lost the favor of the world for mostly unfair reasons. And I think that's likely that Luffy will encounter the same conflict at the end of the story. I think one of the main purposes of Wano is for Oda to establish the vicious cycle of hatred and revenge as a gateway to hell. This cycle makes global peace less possible. So we're going to have God Valley chapters upcoming, and I'm hoping that it goes all the way to the end. But I think that we pretty much already know that Roxy Zebek is going to attempt to kill all these celestial dragons there in God Valley. And a lot of people are going to resonate with this approach and essentially believe Rox to be the good guy. And some people are going to be very, very confused when Roger shows up and fights against him. But the point is to end the cycle. When we get to the end of the story and the celestial dragons are dethroned, the world's collective will may be in fact genocide for everything that the celestial dragons have ever done to anyone. And Luffy will oppose this, just the same as Roger will oppose it in God Valley, just the same as Shanks opposed it in Marineford. At some point the violence must end for Nika to make One Piece a reality. And then it will be a debate as to whether Luffy embodies the will of the people or what's right. Honestly guys, the inspiration for this video actually came from a lot of comments that I received that believe in no uncertain terms that Kaido would win in a rematch versus Gear 5th. And I thought to get into all the little details of it, like the people bring up that, well, Luffy ate meat in the middle of the fight, so he rejuvenated. And they totally ignore the fact that Kaido drank booze and he seemed to be rejuvenated in a similar way, like booze is Kaido's meat. And just go on like that, yada yada, and get into all the points. But I decided that this is kind of boring, and maybe misses the point. So instead we pivoted, and what I intended to establish here is that awakenings right now is a very vague concept with a lot of possibility. And I intended to use this discussion as a backbone to sort of explain the battle in Wano, and elements from it which may imply aspects of the endgame and our hero's nature. And I guess you guys decide if we hit our mark. But yeah, as always, whether or not you believe what I'm saying or not, I hope that it gave you something to think about. Remember to check out my books, The Booms, and if you happen to read them, please leave a review. Let other people know what you think about them. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.